All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Occupy Fantasy YouTube channel. We are here today for some DraftKings MMA DFS, UFC 262, Chandler versus Oliveira, the full card, best bets, predictions, picks, lineup advice, FanDuel, DraftKings tips, everything you need to know for UFC 262. We are here for you. We'll be here for about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer if the questions run a little bit longer than usual. But we'll be here for 30 minutes answering all of your questions that you have about tonight's slate from a betting and a DFS perspective. All the content at OccupyFantasy.com and MMADFS.com are here to help you out. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here of Occupy Fantasy, joined like I am every Saturday by the Occupy Fantasy MMA Daily Plug writer and owner of MMADFS.com, Jake the Snake. What's up, Jake?
What's up, man? Good to be here. This slate looks awesome, so I'm pumped.
Oh yeah, super pumped. This is a hell of a slate. We looked at this on Monday or Tuesday, how good this slate truly was, and you and I both play a ton of tournaments. A lot of the Occupy way is playing high risk contests, and Jake, this from a DFS perspective, we figured it out early that this would be a great high risk slate.
Yeah, for sure, man. Like immediately we could tell, be like, all right, well, salary is not going to be restrictive at all. So we can basically do whatever we want, which means ownership's going to be spread out. Way more combinations, way more possibilities, and way less splits, hopefully at the top. So, looking forward to it for high risk for sure.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do during this live stream, we're going to break down the main event, Oliveira versus Chandler. And if you read the Daily Plug, you probably have some idea of who Jake is on that in that side of the fight. We're going to talk about any newcomers that are making their debuts here. Discuss fights that we want to target from a DFS perspective. We will talk about some low-owned fighters that we plan on using in our lineups to help get different in tournaments. And then we'll talk about some bets at the end and try to nail one of our stream parlays that we've yet to do so far. So we got a lot of people in the chat here. T Nasty, totally not the FBI, Straight Rippin', Chris, Eagles, all the folks in the chat. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. We'll get to them as we go throughout the show until 4:40 p.m. Eastern. So Jake, I have on the screen here. Let's bring up the Daily Plug, OccupyFantasy.com. For those who don't know, the Daily Plug is written by Jake. Basically, what he does, he talks about his favorite low-risk DFS plays, his favorite high-risk DFS plays, and then his best bets, which have just been absolutely on fire this year, and how to take all of this and implement them into FanDuel and DraftKings lineup strategies. So, Jake, maybe people will get the idea of who you like by looking at the cover of the Daily Plug. It's Michael Chandler. Break down this main event for us, who you like, why you like Chandler, and what this means for low risk and high risk lineups.
Yeah, man. So I think you kind of put it out there. I'm definitely picking Chandler to win this. I think Oliveira is good, but I think Chandler is better, and I think Chandler is kind of like the perfect opponent to beat Oliveira. Oliveira is one of the most dangerous submission threats the UFC has ever seen. He has the record for the most submissions in the UFC, so that goes without saying. But Michael Chandler has a wrestling background that I think is going to help him to stay upright. And if it does get on the mat, I think, he can hang. He's not just going to be a fish out of water down there. And I think he has the striking advantage on the feet. He's more powerful. He's coming off 3 straight first-round KOs. And I don't think Oliveira is going to be able to stand up and just compete in a striking battle. So really, Oliveira is one way to win. It's get it to the mat and submit Chandler. Whereas Chandler, as long as he doesn't get submitted, I think he wins this fight, whether it's an early KO, whether the fight lasts longer. Chandler, this will be his 12th fifth-round fight. I think 6 of those made it to the championship rounds, and 4 of those went the distance. So, he's not going to have a problem going 25 minutes, whereas Oliveira has never been to a 4th round. This is his 3rd 5-round fight. One of them was against Max Holloway. It ended in the 1st round with Oliveira getting knocked out. And the other one was a 3rd round guillotine submission win for Oliveira against Kevin Lee in his 2nd most recent fight. So he doesn't have any experience beyond the 3rd round. So I think whether this ends early or goes late, I think it's going to benefit Chandler. I know if I was setting the line, I could have seen, I would have probably made Chandler a slight favorite here. So, the fact that we can get him as an underdog, both for betting, for DFS, just for everything, it's a perfect situation. I think Chandler gets the knockout in the first 2 rounds. And I think he has the wrestling to compete with Oliveira, that if he does get taken down, I think he'll be all right. But, I mean, we'll see how that goes.
I mean that's high endorsements for a guy who, if you're just looking at the stats and you're looking at the game logs, you're looking at fighters' histories, and you don't know the context. You may be wondering why this guy in his second UFC fight is fighting for the championship, why he's basically a coin flip against a guy who's won like 8 straight UFC fights. It's because he's been around for a while and has been waiting for his shot for the UFC. And I mean, all the things Jake just said hold true. So Jake, with this fight basically being a coin flip, for low risk contests, I know we're here for mostly tournaments, but for low risk contests on DraftKings, we talk about stacking the main event in double ups, 50-50s, head to heads. It seems like that's an easy solution here too, is just to play both Oliveira and Chandler, probably get a 90, 100 plus point score.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's really hard to see this fight really busting. I think the only way it busts is if it gets to the 3rd round and one of them gets an early 3rd round finish. We saw that when Oliveira choked out Kevin Lee. He only scored like 67 DraftKings points or something. I mean, that's really unlikely to happen. And I mean, that could happen anytime ever. So,
Right.
like, just like any normal 5-round fight where we're fully confident it's going to produce a high point score. I mean, this is one of those. I mean, one other thing I wanted to point out is Chandler's never been submitted, and Oliveira has been knocked out 4 times in his career. So we're always looking at how people can attack the weaknesses and the strengths of the other. And, Chandler's never been submitted here. So, I mean, if anyone was going to do it, it would be Oliveira. But I think Chandler knocks him out, and I think he's gonna score well. So, I mean, you still have to stack it, because if Oliveira does get the submission, you're going to want those points in low risk. But definitely stack it, and I'm going to have a lot more Chandler than Oliveira.
Makes sense. All right, so there's the main event breakdown, Chandler versus Oliveira. Let's move on to UFC newcomers. Jake, do we have any newcomers on this slate that have not fought in the UFC before?
Just one, Tucker Lutz.
Yeah, so let's get the breakdown. Fortunately for those of you who look at things from a math perspective, Tucker Lutz did have a couple Dana White's Contender Series appearances, 2 fights worth of stats. But Jake, just from talking to you and reading kind of your stuff, it didn't seem like you were too impressed with Lutz. But what is, what kind of game does he have, and how does he fit into DFS?
Yeah, so, I mean, he has an impressive record. He's coming in on an 11-fight win streak, which, I mean, people are going to see that. And a bunch of those, all of those, I think, were finishes before his Dana White Contender Series fights. But now he's coming off back-to-back decision wins. I didn't think either one was that impressive. He was fighting a lot of questionable competition on the Maryland regional scenes out of a small gym. He's not training with like a bunch.
Let's not talk about the Maryland regional scene, which is known to produce studs like Matthew Semmelsberger and maybe a couple other guys.
Yeah, sorry, the elite Maryland regional scene. But I wasn't really that impressed with this guy on Dana White Contender Series. His first fight was a full stand-up striking battle. He came out ahead in strikes, but the other guy wasn't very impressive. Early on, I thought Lutz was kind of lacking head movement. He was getting caught too much early on, but then his opponent just faded in the last 2 rounds, and it was kind of just a gimme. One thing to note is he's been fighting at 155 pounds since 2018 for like his last 5 or 6 fights, and now he's going to be dropping back down to 145 pounds. So that always, that's an extra element that could increase the variance. I mean, who knows how he's going to look at 145? Maybe he'll look better. He looked pretty decent at weigh-ins. He was kind of like thick and stout at 155, so he looks a little bit more lean at 145. And he gets an opponent that's not very good in Kevin Aguilar, who's coming off 3 straight losses. 2 of those went the distance. Aguilar's he's 2-3 in the UFC, and 5 of his last 6 fights have gone the distance. And he's just a pure stand-up boxer. All of his fights are kind of low-volume boxing matches. I think this is going to be a low-volume decision. I think Lutz probably wins, but the numbers could look like his first Dana White Contender Series fight where we don't see any takedowns. He lands 80, 90 significant strikes. He wins a decision, and he probably scores 75, 80 points on DraftKings, which I don't think is going to be enough in this slate. So, I mean, I would still pick him to win the fight, but I'm not excited about his ceiling.
Absolutely. So, I appreciate that breakdown, Jake, of Tucker Lutz, the only newcomer on this card. It is a pay-per-view event, and we're back with fans in the stadium. The last pay-per-view event in Jacksonville was just absolutely lit with the fans and the excitement. Hopefully, we get another card like that. So, let's move forward and let's talk about where we shine the most. High-risk contests. For those who aren't aware, don't know us, I won 100K in the DraftKings GPP earlier this year, won 50K last year on FanDuel MMA DFS, Knockout King qualifier. Jake has won multiple GPPs on both FanDuel and DraftKings. His bets have been hitting at a 40 or 50% ROI rate in 2021. So just incredible knowledge here. So if you have questions, let's get them in. And I think, Jake, probably the best question and probably the most important question comes from T Nasty, longtime follower. What's up, T Nasty? As we start to talk about fights to target for our tournament lineups, he says the model loves Jordan Wright. Jake hates Jordan Wright. To be fair, we don't like Jordan Wright that much either. It's just, let's keep that in mind. He says, who's going to be right tonight? So as we look here on the daily plug, we have the largest favorites and the highest KO probabilities for the slate. And we see that, I mean, it's rare to see this, but we see 2 of the 4 highest knockout probabilities on the card are in the same fight. Jordan Wright, Jamie Pickett. Jake, no surprise that this is a fight to target, as these are guys that we would generally like to pick on in DFS and in bets, but they're facing each other. Someone's got to win, and it looks like a knockout is pretty likely.
Yeah, man. I mean, Wright has never been in a fight that lasted longer than 6 minutes. He's got a super padded record. I feel like we kind of talk about the same things every slate he's on, but he had that kind of ridiculous doctor stoppage in his first UFC fight. He landed like a spinning wheel kick to start off the fight against Ike Villanueva. They were fighting up at 205 pounds. And then as soon as Ike gets up, they go in the clinch, and he lands a couple high knees and splits open the eye, just kind of right above the nose. And, the fight gets stopped like 10 seconds later, and he gets a round 1 KO. So that obviously boosted up his ownership for his next fight, and then he kind of showed us who we were expecting him to be, and he gets knocked out by Jaquin Buckley. That was coming off the Impa Kasangane like knockout of the year, and that should have ended at the end of the first round, but Wright was somehow able to hang on and make it to the second round, and 18 seconds into the second round, Buckley knocks him out. Wright's striking defense is terrible. He has 2 moves. He has like the spinning wheel kick that he can land. It's pretty quick. He has good range. And then he'll go in the tie clinch and just like fire off a bunch of high knees. And those are his only 2 moves. So as long as Pickett can defend those 2 moves and just avoid the high kick, not get caught up in the clinch, I think he should be fine. And Wright also had a height and reach advantage in his first 2 fights, whereas Pickett has the longest reach on the slate. He can match his height. I think it's going to be harder to land high knees on Pickett. I mean, Pickett's not the most exciting fighter. He's been to decisions in 3 of his last 4 fights, but he does have a history of knockouts on his record, and I think this is the perfect matchup for him to get a finish. I'm really big on Pickett. I mean, I get it. Like, both these guys are pretty targetable, but Pickett's never been knocked out. So I think if Wright's going to win this fight, he might surprise some people and take it to the mat. He does have a decent number of submissions on his record. They were against a lower level of competition. Pickett's been submitted a couple times. So I think Wright might come out trying to grapple, and Pickett's going to be trying to knock him out. The only thing that worries me is Pickett's a pretty tentative fighter, and it's possible that, Wright's coming off a KO. He comes in a little more cautious. Pickett's coming off a loss in his UFC debut, and he's already a cautious fighter. If this fight is slow in the first round and gets to the second round, even if there's a finish in the early second round, it might not really go off. But, I mean, it's an unlikely scenario. I think that we're going to see a finish in the first 2 rounds. I'm expecting Pickett to knock Wright out.
Yeah, I mean, really good analysis there, Jake. And just to get a little peek behind the curtain on why Wright does rank so highly in our model. And remember, our model at OccupyFantasy.com, we'll give you a little peek here. Wright is the number 2 fighter on the slate. And just some reasoning behind that is kind of what you mentioned about the potential grappling, because the model does go back pre-UFC days and does highlight a potential advantage for Wright there on the ground. And that's the reason he ranks a little bit higher than Pickett. Regardless of which side you like, note that both these fighters are terrible, and it is a fight that you probably want to target. So let's keep that in mind. Jake, let's talk about some other fights that we want to target. As we see here, it's 4:15. We'll be here for 15 more minutes or so. If you have any other questions, get them in the chat. Other fights that we want to target, Jake. I think this Mazzani fight is something that I'm interested in. I know you like both sides potentially, and then any other fights that you're looking to get both sides in your lineups. Not in the same
Yeah,
line, not in the same lineup, obviously, but in separate
right,
lineups.
right.
Yeah.
Nah, I mean, you nailed it, man. The Mazzani, Priscilla, Zombie Girl, Cachoeira fight. I think that's definitely one you're gonna want to be heavy. I mean, on both sides, like they're both. I would say she's a pretty terrible fighter. She's been finished in the first round in less than 2 minutes, 3 times in the UFC. She's coming off a massive explosion spot. So, I mean, that might boost her ownership a little bit higher than where we've seen it recently. But she's normally a grappler, goes for a decent number of takedowns. I mean, she rarely makes it to a decision, which is great for DFS. And then Priscilla is the ideal opponent for DFS. She just goes in there, just charging forward, constantly throwing strikes. I mean, she's going to make whatever fight she's in higher scoring, no matter who it's against. So, I mean, it's kind of a dream matchup there. You know, either Cachoeira is going to get a knockout or Mazzani is going to get her down, land a ton of strikes, get a bunch of control time. So I think Mazzani is more interesting on DraftKings, where I think she has a much higher floor. Just because we did see in her last decision, she didn't put up a huge FanDuel score, but she did put up a huge DraftKings score. So I think she's really safe on DraftKings. And I think if she can get a finish, she has the potential to be one of the highest scorers on the slate on FanDuel. So, I mean, those are the two fights, the Wright and the Pickett, and the Mazzani and the Priscilla fight are the two that I'm really interested in being heavy on both sides, other than the main event. I think there's kind of a couple trap fights that the field is going to be really heavy on both sides, like the Burgos and Barboza fight and the Dariush Ferguson fight. I think those are going to be over-owned relative to their chances of putting up a top 6 score on the slate. I think there's still a decent chance they do, but I could see both ending in decisions. So, I mean, Burgos Barboza, it's just going to be a stand-up battle, and it's going to score better on FanDuel based on significant strikes. But on DraftKings, I mean, we've seen Burgos in these crazy fights before not put up huge scores, so he really needs to get that finish. I do think a Burgos round 3 KO is pretty likely. Barboza, he didn't look great at weigh-ins. He didn't look terrible, but he was kind of slow to weigh in. You know, it's a tough cut to get down to 145. So I like Burgos. I mean, I think he's a good play, but I do think both those guys are going to be over-owned. Same for Dariush Ferguson. And I like Dariush to win a decision, and it's probably only going to score like 90, 95 DraftKings points, which might not get there on this slate.
Cool. Good stuff, Jake. All right, let's get through some of these questions. And then I do want to touch on the fact that salary doesn't matter as much for tournaments. So we'll come back to that in a second. So let's rip through these questions really quickly. Eagle says, thoughts on Muniz at MVP, Andre Muniz?
So I actually won a GPP on FanDuel with Muniz as MVP, but it was on a smaller, I think it was a 7-fight card because we had 2 cancellations for COVID. And I think it's hard for him to be the highest scorer, just because he's not going to get knockdowns. He's probably not going to get takedowns. His submission game is really more defensive. He has like a really good guard. I mean, the dude is a monster off his back. He gets a ton of round 1 submissions. But obviously, this is his toughest matchup to get a submission ever. I mean, go against Jacare Souza, even an older Souza. I think Souza is more prone to be knocked out right now, as we saw against Holland. Mm-hmm. And Muniz he's just a pure submission threat. So I like him as kind of a dart throw, but I think there's probably a good chance it goes to decision. And if he does get a finish, it's still unlikely he's going to be the highest score on the slate. So I think on this one, I would rather have him in my flex spot than MVP.
Awesome. And what about Dariush MVP? I know you just mentioned you like him going to a decision, but is there any ranges of outcomes where you see Dariush being the highest scorer on the slate?
I mean, Dariush generally scores well, but this is definitely his toughest matchup to get a finish. I mean, Ferguson's only been finished twice in his career. One of those was in the 5th round against Justin Gaethje. I think the other one was like 2008 or 9 or something. Super long time ago, like 12 years ago. Like, Ferguson is so durable. I mean, anyone that watched the Gaethje fight, like, you saw how durable Ferguson is. I mean, the dude literally like ended the fight with brain damage because he refused to go down. And it's also really, really hard to submit him. So I really think that if Dariush wins this fight, which I think he does, I think it comes in a decision. And I think if Ferguson wins, it probably comes early because we've seen Dariush vulnerable in the first 2 rounds. That's going to make it really hard for Dariush to be the top scorer, especially on FanDuel. I think he could score better on DraftKings through grappling, similar to what we saw in his last fight, where he puts up a ton of control time, decent number of takedowns. I think Dariush could put up an Oliveira-type decision win that wouldn't score great on FanDuel.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, I'm completely on board with your answer there, Jake. Let's see. E is asking any underdogs that we like. Yeah, man, we always love some underdogs. So let's talk about that, Jake, and maybe this transitions into some of the low-owned fighters that we're looking to target here. So underdogs, bottom half of the salary range, fighters that you're looking at for tournaments.
So I really, we already touched on Priscilla. I really like her. She's the cheapest fighter on DraftKings and I believe second cheapest on FanDuel. I think she has a great chance to get a first-round finish against Mazzani. If she doesn't, she probably gets completely controlled on the ground for the whole time. So total boom or bust. But I like Andrea Lee. When I first looked at the slate, I was like, well, that fight's an easy fade. And then I started digging into it more. And, anytime you see someone get a decision loss that scores like 70 points on DraftKings, I think that you should pay attention to that. Because just if she had gotten the decision going her way, that's 100 points. And normally, people land less strikes and whatnot in a loss. So, I think she has the ceiling to score over 100 points easily. And we've never seen anywhere close to it. I think her highest score was like 88 points in her debut. And since then, her scores have been terrible. So I think she's going to go really overlooked, but she lands the second most number of significant strikes on the slate. She lands a decent number of takedowns, almost 2 per fight. I think she has sneaky upside, and Shevchenko doesn't absorb a ton of strikes, but her last 2 matches have been grappling matches that completely drag that number down, and she's a pure striker. So I think, Lee's coming off 3 straight decision losses. 2 of those were split decisions. I think she's going to be extra motivated. She lives in Texas. This is a Houston card. I think she's going to be super motivated, land a ton of volume, get a few takedowns. I don't really think she gets a finish. I think it ends in a decision, but I think she could score like 100 to 105 points in a decision win here. And at $7,013 on FanDuel, that's easily going to be useful. So I really like Lee and also Catchaware, but Lee's definitely safer of the two. She's much higher floor.
Yeah, and just to talk about that, the line has moved an incredible amount in Lee's favor. Shevchenko opened this match close to minus 160 at most books. As of now, it's basically a coin flip. I think Lee is plus 105 or so, depending on where you look. And if you're playing low risk contests, 50-50s, double ups, head to heads, we always like to look for line flips or fighters where they're quote unquote mispriced based on their salary. And Lee fits the bill there, right? You look at the fighters priced above her and the fighter priced below her. She easily stands out as the highest probability to win in that range. So I think in low risk contests, she'll be relatively popular and a great play there. I don't like you, Jake. I don't think her ownership gets too high to where it's prohibitive in high risk contests. And we always love targeting fighters who have a ceiling that they haven't shown yet. So, speaking of some potentially low owned fighters, the Schnell Bonserine fight. Bonserine missed weight, and they were already fighting at, what was it, catch weight or up 10 pounds, right? And
Yep.
so Straight Ribbon's asking about this weight miss. Is Bonserine a fade if you're playing 20 lineups on DraftKings? And then my follow-up question to you, Jake, is we're looking for low-owned fighters. How does Schnell get there despite all of his conversations this week talking about how he's just trying to play it safe and go to a decision?
Man, I think that both guys are kind of round one submission or bust. Schnell took a year off and just came back like a different person. He had a kid in that time, and it seems like he's not going for highlights anymore. He said this. He just wants to fight for 15 minutes, be smart, play it safe. Bonnerine missed by 1 pound, but he didn't look terrible. 1 pound over the extra pound. So he was 137 pounds for a 135-pound fight. Both these guys normally fight at 125 pounds. But Bonnerine, he's always been big for 125. He used to fight higher. This one, I don't want much exposure to it. I think this is how it's going to play out. I think that coming in, Bonnerin going to be looking for the takedowns, and Schnell does his best work looking for submissions off his back. So there's a chance that one of them gets a submission. I don't think it's going to play out like a pure stand-up battle, which we sometimes see with two submission specialists. I think Schnell's quicker, and he's going to be jabbing Bonnerin up, and he's going to want to take it to the ground. And that's going to be the moment where this fight has a chance to go off, is either Schnell is going to throw up a triangle choke or Bonnerin is going to look for a rear naked choke. And if one of them gets a submission, obviously it's going to be a high-scoring fight. But if that doesn't happen, I think this plays out to a decision, lower volume. I don't think either guy will be dominant enough in the grappling to put up a big score. You know, Bonnerin's coming off a KO, which was just crazy against Kai Kara France.
A hectic fight.
Oh my God, he controlled him for the whole first round. It looked like at 5 different points he was going to choke him out. And then with 20 seconds left in the first round, somehow Kai gets up to his feet and lands like 4 right hands and just face plants Bonnerin and then does a victory lap and like doesn't realize the fight was stopped and goes in for another punch. Bonnerin sees that, gets up, throws his mouth guard at him. I mean, just total chaos. I don't think we see 2 Bonnerin chaos slates in a row. So I think this one's going to come back down to earth, and we're going to see that one end in a decision, probably for Schnell to win a decision. But like I said, either guy could get a round 1 submission.
Let's see. I think we did have one more question here. Yeah, Corey's asking. He said he's just joined. What are your thoughts on the Lutz and Aguilar fight? We touched on Lutz a little bit earlier, so rewind back to talk about basically his scouting report coming off the Dana White's Contender Series and what to expect from him. But Jake, any way that fight is great for DFS scoring, how does that happen?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the only way it happens is with a KO on the feet. I don't really see it happening. I think Aguilar is probably one of the worst plays on the slate. I think Lutz is going to be over-owned. I would say if one of them is going to go off, it's going to be Lutz, but I don't think it happens.
So I guess I'll have a ton of Aguilar exposure in tournaments is what it sounds like. So
there you go.
All right, it's 4:30. We did start a couple minutes late, so we'll stick around for 5 more minutes till 4:35. Any final questions about UFC 262 best bets or fights to target or lineup strategies for DFS? Go ahead and throw it in the chat. We'll answer them here over the next 5 minutes. While we're waiting for those questions, Jake, let's get to the stream parlay of the week. Jake puts his best bets in the Daily Plug every single week. At his website, MMADFS.com. He also talks about betting implications for every single fight, not just his favorite plays. So go check that out. So, Jake, I'm going to give a play. You're going to give a play. We've literally yet to hit this so far, but all it takes is 1 or 2, and we're right back in the mix. So I'm going to give my side of the parlay first, and it's going to be – we haven't talked about this fight at all yet, but it's going to be Vivi Araujo by decision. I think you can get it at plus 200 depending on where you look. That is my stream parlay side.
Interesting. I don't hate it. I mean, I kind of like the other side of it, the Chookagian decision at plus 105, just because I think if she wins, it's going to come in a decision, and she has like a 57% chance to win. So, I mean, there's a little bit of value in that line. But, I mean, Vivi was one of my favorite plays when I initially looked at the slate, and then just the more I dug into it, I don't know, I got kind of off of her just looking at Chookagian. But anyways, okay, I'm going to go with Grundy wins by submission, and I've actually seen that at plus 700 now. We have it listed at plus 600 on the plug, but I found it better, so, you know, hashtag line shopping.
Hell yeah. Let's see. So actually, I brought up Grundy's notes here. We haven't talked about him at all. You mentioned him as a high-risk play in the plug. For those who missed, our stream parlay is Araujo by decision and Grundy to get a submission. Jake, whenever you calculate that, let us know what the payouts are. In the meantime, Grundy looks like a better play on DraftKings than on FanDuel based on his style. But just talk to me about why you like that bet and why you like him in DFS on DraftKings.
Yeah, man, I really like Grundy here. I think he's a good chance to get a round 1 submission, which I consider going with that line, but the value at 700 was too good. He's like a really good wrestler, pretty one-dimensional wrestler, coming off a really, really tough fight against Monsar Ivalov, where he nearly got a round 1 submission in that fight. I mean, I don't know how Ivalov got out of that. I mean, dude literally has an iron neck. Like, face was purple. He had the Bravo choke locked in. Somehow, dude kicks off the fence, spins around, gets out of it. Apparently, Grundy broke his jaw in that fight. Obviously, that doesn't help. But he got a round 2 KO in his UFC debut, which was the first knockout of his career. Basically, all of his wins have come from decisions or first-round submissions. And he's just a really good English wrestler. I think he comes in and he's just going to really, really be looking to wrestle against Vinyata. who's coming down to 145 pounds for the first time in his career. I mean, who knows what that's going to do for his cardio, but he could tire out as the fight goes on. I just really like Grundy's submission chances here, and he has the potential to put up a good score on DraftKings in a decision if he can just dominate on the ground. But I think it's a good matchup. I think that it's not like a super easy matchup, which would be ideally what we're looking for, but I don't think it's a terrible matchup either. I think Vinyata's lost every fight he's ever been taken down in. He hasn't been submitted since his debut when Tony Ferguson submitted him, but that was with a Bravo choke, which is Grundy's move, so you never know. But yeah, I like Grundy for submission here and think that definitely a better play on DraftKings for sure. But if he gets a submission, obviously he's good on both sides.
For sure.
Did you say Araujo is plus 200 on the decision? I didn't have that line in front of me.
Yeah, I think PointsBet, who is our partner in Sportsbook, had him at plus 190, had her at plus 195. I think I saw some plus 200s out there.
Okay, well, if it's plus 200, that's going to give us plus 2,300 for the parlay. So that's pretty solid.
We'll be right back in the green if that hits. So.
Oh yeah, 23-1.
All right, final questions. I guess we missed this earlier. Ed's question. No Nordic track this week. For those who don't listen to our other content, Nordic track is Norlander PGA. Normally ranks high in the model. Not necessarily sure the success follows. So, I mean, the easy correlation here would be Jordan Wright for this slate. And then Kyle asks, what is your exposure on Burgos? For me, Jake, I'm a little under the projected ownership, the projected field ownership. I'm basically matching Burgos' KO percentage, which is like 25%. How about you?
I mean, I think that's the move. I got a little bit talked into going slightly higher. My original target was lower, and then I saw, Barboza's kind of iffy weigh in, and then Burgos seems super motivated to get that finish. So I bumped it up from like 25 to somewhere in like the 30 to 35 range. I'm not all the way finalized with lineups yet, but I do like the Burgos round 3 KO. I even considered that in our parlay. I really think that there's a good chance that happens. I also like betting that fight ends in a round 3 KO, because I think that Barboza is definitely capable of finishing it late as well. And you can get that line at like plus 850, plus 900. But I like Burgos. I just think that like you said, like his chances of a KO are 25%. We haven't projected ownership at 35%. I don't see him scoring well in a decision, especially on DraftKings. So, I mean, the smart play is to be under. I mean, the playing with your heart play is be like, oh, this guy's going to be in a complete war. I want to have more exposure to him, and that's why the field's going to have more.
Yeah, go play him on FanDuel where we get the extra points for significant strikes. A much better play there. So,
yep.
All right, that'll do it for this stream. We appreciate everyone listening. If you like what you saw today, make sure you're subscribed to us here on YouTube. Click the subscribe button right below the video. That'll get you notified whenever we go live for any sports or if we upload any new videos here to YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. The more thumbs ups that we get, it lets us know that we should continue to make more of this type of content. So if you like it, give us a thumbs up. We'll continue to do these UFC videos every single Saturday. If you want to talk to Jake, myself, other Occupy staff, and other OccupyFantasy.com members, you can do so in our Discord channel. Just click join right below the video. That'll get you access to our Occupy Fantasy Discord server. So go do that. OccupyFantasy.com is where you can read the daily plug, Jake's top plays, best bets, and lineup strategies. Our Occupy model ranks every fighter on both FanDuel and DraftKings with projected ownership. And check out Jake's site, MMA DFS.com, where he literally breaks down every single fight on the card, fighter history, expectations, DFS, and betting implications. Jake, we somehow, I mentioned this like 5 times, but we never actually talked about it. So for the last 30 seconds, 1 minute, talk to me about why salary doesn't matter on this slate as much as it normally does.
Yeah, man. So, normally we get some really good options at the top, like confident, high KO percentage guys. And now we get Gina Mazzani and Christos Giagos. On top of the fact that we love the underdog in the main event, we love, there's so many fights that are so close to a coin flip that, I feel like DK and FanDuel didn't even really know how to price these people. But basically, normally we get a lot more extremes. We get a lot of expensive people, some bad cheap plays. I mean, we get 12 fights here, and half of them are basically coin flips. So, I mean, you can easily leave tons of salary left over. I think most people will. I mean, I don't think this is going to be a normal slate where the majority of people spend it all, but it's still going to be way easier to be unique. And yeah, I mean, that's my take on it.
Yeah, and just for reference here, I mean, we see fighters on a normal slate, an $8,900 fighter on DraftKings is usually like minus 200 or greater. and we're getting those
Right.
fighters at minus 150, minus 160. 83, 8400, we're seeing minus 130, 140, 150. They're minus 110, minus 105. As a result, on the flip side, we see a lot of the underdogs in the 7K range and in the $10 to $14 range on DraftKings at like plus 105, plus 110, plus 120. So the fact that more fighters have a higher probability of winning lets us believe that there's a very good chance that salary is left over in a much higher amount on this slate than it is in other slates. So that'll do it for us. We appreciate everyone listening. You can follow Jake on Twitter at DFS_MMA. You can follow me at Brian Jester FF. You can follow us at Occupy Fantasy. Appreciate everyone listening. Good luck tonight. Enjoy the fights.